back in business. My uncle was set to be released from prison right around New Year's Day in 1984, but the feds didn't let him out. Bobby Simone and Nicky Jr. flew down to Texas to see what the issue was. After a few days, Bobby sorted everything out, and my uncle's release was backed on and scheduled for January 20th. A bunch of us flew down to El Paso to be there when he got out. It was me, Chucky, Lawrence, Salvie, Bobby Simone, Nicky Jr., Harold Garber, Chucky's son Joey, Tori Scafidi, and a few others. We took several suites at the Marriott, and we had one giant party in that hotel. We must have spent 20 grand on food and liquor that weekend. I remember having mixed feelings about my uncle coming home. I knew it meant that my life was going back to the way it was before he went to jail, running around all day, all of the chaos. But that was the life I had chosen, or I guess had been chosen for me. I didn't have the option of saying, hey, I want to go to college, or I want to be a doctor. This was the path that I was put on as a young boy. There was no way to change that. I was born and raised in this thing, in La Cosa Nostra. So the day he gets out of jail, we take a limousine to the prison. It was me, Lawrence, Nicky Jr., and Bobby Simone. My uncle comes out, and he's wearing a red windbreaker and a pair of sunglasses, and he has a box containing his belongings. The first thing he says is, let's get the fuck out of here. And we start heading towards the car. The news media, the FBI, and even the Texas Rangers were there, and everyone was taking pictures. Not the baseball team, the cops. They were wearing the 10-gallon hats and had the stars on their chest, the whole 9 yards. As we're walking, my uncle nods in their direction and says, get a load of these jerk-offs in the cowboy hats. I knew from my uncle's demeanor that he had not changed one bit during his 17 months in El Paso. He looked very fit and had a deep tan. Back at the hotel, everyone made a big deal when he got there, and we had a good time. He seemed like he was in a good mood. He pulled me aside at one point and asked me about the money I had collected while he was away. I told him it was just under $3 million, and he was happy. He then pulled me away even further and said, what's going on with Salvie and Chucky? I told him Chucky wasn't happy that Salvie broke off the engagement, but that Chucky hadn't said too much about it. He said, we gotta keep our antennas up on this one. I don't like this situation. I knew right there that my uncle was spooked about the possibility of Salvie marrying Chucky's daughter, and then with the engagement being broken off, it seemed like he was even more spooked. I can't explain it, but he was always thinking like that. Nothing was simple. Everything had a subplot, and the subplots had subplots. It would make you dizzy listening to it. Meanwhile, 10 feet away, Chucky Merlino, Salvie Testa, and the rest of those gathered to celebrate Nicky Scarfo's release from prison were having a great time and oblivious to what was going on in Scarfo's head. To the others, this was just a party, but with Nicky Scarfo, nothing was ever what it seemed. It was a scene fit for a king. News cameras were everywhere. Photographers snapped shots of his every move. Nicodemos Scarfo's long-awaited homecoming at the Philadelphia International Airport caused the level of commotion usually reserved for the arrival of a head of state or an A-list celebrity. And in a lot of ways, it was appropriate. Scarfo had become both. He was the undisputed head of the Philadelphia Atlantic City La Cosa Nostra, and his notoriety had made him one of the nation's foremost celebrity gangsters. Always impeccably dressed and groomed, the 55-year-old Scarfo had become a media sensation, a precursor to the flamboyant John Gotti, who was then still a lowly soldier in New York's Gambino family. As the cameras flashed and reporters followed his entourage, little Nicky was carrying himself with a swashbuckling swagger and regal flair not typical of someone who had just been released from prison. I think, in many ways, my uncle had become even more self-centered and more self-absorbed during the 17 months that he was away. His ego was 1,000 times worse than it was before. Flanking Scarfo as he walked from the airport terminal to a waiting fleet of white limousines were his top 2 lieutenants, Philip Leonetti, who was 30 years old, and Salvatore Testa, who was 27. When Scarfo was away in El Paso, Leonetti and Testa worked together to look after his empire with ruthless efficiency, proving their merit as future leaders in La Cosa Nostra and as possible heirs to Scarfo's throne. But therein was a problem. Beneath the surface and all of the smiles, backslaps, and kisses on the cheek, Scarfo was an evil and vindictive despot who maintained an unquenchable thirst for blood as a means of both obtaining and keeping power. While Scarfo loved every minute of it, Leonetti was growing tired of it. There was a time in my life when all I wanted was to be with my uncle and to be with La Cosa Nostra and live that life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just like my uncle. It's all that I knew. But when he went away, and I started living my own life, waking up every day and making my own decisions, I started to resent both my uncle and what being involved in La Cosa Nostra was doing to my life. I felt like I had no life being in the mob, no identity. I realized that I was a lot happier doing things with Maria, or doing things with Philip Jr., than I was doing things with my uncle. But I was trapped. Once you are in this life, there's only two ways out: jail or death. There was no retiring or quitting. I felt stuck. And then there was the pure sport of it. La Cosa Nostra was my uncle's whole life. He lived for this thing. Every day was just like the day before it. Where are we getting money? How much are we getting? Who's making what moves? Who do we have to watch? Who do we have to kill? That was our routine, day after day after day. If you made a big score and made him a lot of money, the second he was done counting the money, he would say to me, "This guy thinks he's a big shot now. All of a sudden he's J.D. Rockefeller." Or, "We gotta watch him so he doesn't get too big for his britches." The guy just hands you a bag with $200,000 in it, and 10 minutes later, you're burying the guy. It didn't make sense. But that's how he was. If he ordered you to kill someone, and you did it perfectly, and you got the guy just like he asked, he'd say to me, "Now this guy thinks he's Al Capone because he killed the guy." As quickly as he would build somebody up, he'd already be bringing them down. Nowhere would this be more evident than with the next mobster who found himself in Nicky Scarfo's crosshairs. So when we get back to Atlantic City, my uncle stayed in for a day or two, just to get his bearings straight. On the third or fourth day, he had me set up a full day of meetings at Scanicchio's, so he could talk to everyone and see what was going on. He told me to bring down Chucky and Bobby Simone, and he wanted to see Blackie Napoli from North Jersey. He was going to meet with everyone separately, and he wanted an hour or two blocked out for each meeting. I said, "Do you want me to bring Salvie down?" And he said, "I don't think we need to." Now this gets my antenna up, because the whole time my uncle is gone, it was mainly Salvie and his guys who were out there shooting it out with the Rico Benes, and Salvie was also heavily involved in the street tax collections. I found it strange that my uncle wasn't bringing him down to meet with him too. He tells me, "I want you in on these meetings," which means I gotta sit there all day. The first guy down was Blackie Napoli. When my uncle was away, I was meeting with Blackie once or twice a month, and he was bringing my uncle's tribute money down. Now Blackie was getting up there in age, and he wasn't as sharp as he used to be, but him and my uncle went way back, even before they were in Yardville together. My uncle wastes no time in telling him, "These envelopes you sent down while I was away, they were light. What are you guys doing up there? Did you forget how to make money, or are you guys just giving it away?" When my uncle became boss, remember, it was him and Blackie who first went to see Bobby Manor the day after Phil Testa's wake. My uncle always knew that Blackie was letting Bobby Manor and the Genovese take more than they should in North Jersey, but my uncle felt like Blackie had given away the store up there when he was in jail. Then my uncle told Blackie, "We're going to tighten our belts up there. No more free lunches for anyone. I don't care who they're with." And Blackie left. I could tell he was disappointed, because he thought he had done a good job while my uncle was gone. When he left, my uncle said, "I'm taking him down. He's getting too old. He's losing his fastball. I'm going to keep him up there, but I'm putting Patty Specs in charge up there. Bring him down tomorrow and tell him I want to see him." Patty Specs was a guy named Pasquale Martorano, who had been with the North Jersey branch of our family dating back to the days when Ange was boss. The next one in was Bobby Simone. My uncle seemed very concerned about Bobby's tax case, and Bobby talked about it a little bit. My uncle then went through the litany of criminal charges that everyone in the family was facing, from Chucky's bribery case to my thing with the mayor, and asked Bobby to explain every possible scenario of everyone's individual cases. This went on for like 2 hours. My uncle was just asking hypotheticals. Towards the end, he said, "I can't depend on anybody in this entire Borgata. Everybody's drunk, stupid, or incompetent. I should go get 6 black guys from North Philly and start a new gang. They'd be better than what I got right now." Now, I can't say anything, but what I'm thinking is, you just came home from jail, you got $3 million sitting in a safe, everybody you wanted us to kill is dead, and you're still complaining? So after Bobby leaves, Chucky comes in. Chucky's telling him everything that had been going on in Philly while he was away. He says to my uncle, "We never filled Frank's spot after he got killed," meaning the consigliere position. "And with Ciancalini in jail, we are down a capo." My uncle says, "I'm going to put my Uncle Nick in as consigliere," meaning his mother's brother, Nicky Buck Piccolo. Now me and Chucky both know how bad my uncle hates his Uncle Nick. He hated him and his brothers his whole life. He used to say they were no good, that they mistreated him, and always tried to hold him back. Now he's going to make him the consigliere. The position of consigliere is very important in La Cosa Nostra. The consigliere is the counselor, someone to settle disputes in the family, and someone who can advise the boss. The consig is the third most powerful position in the family, behind the boss and underboss. Bobby Manna was the chin's consigliere, and Bobby was the chin's eyes and ears. My uncle is going to make his uncle the consigliere, a guy he hated his whole life. It didn't make any sense. It's almost like he was saying, "I don't need a consigliere, because I ain't asking nobody their opinion or how to settle disputes." My uncle settled almost every dispute with a gun, but that wasn't what La Cosa Nostra was about. When my uncle got out of La Tuna, this thing started to become my thing with him. Then he says, "And as for Chicky's crew, let's leave things the way they are for now. Too many chiefs and not enough Indians," which was his way of saying he wanted more soldiers and less captains. He wanted to keep all the power for himself. Then he says to Chucky, "What about Salvie?" It was like he said it in slow motion, like a movie. I couldn't believe it. I immediately felt sick. I knew at that very second that my uncle had decided that he was going to turn on Salvie and was now going to make a case for killing him. Leonetti's intuitions would prove to be spot on.